Okay, so this ties in to number 2 of the Pendejo game, which is solipsism. And solipsism is the belief that your own experiences are universal, right? Because I had never experienced racial discrimination at the Costco photo counter, I assumed that it doesn't happen, that it was something that my husband had done, right? Because we think that our own experiences are universal, or the only ones that matter. I've never experienced that, so it must not have happened. I overcame that, so it must not be a thing, right? So privilege is when you think something's not a problem because it's not a problem personally to you. I don't know if you remember the Brock Turner case where this was the Stanford guy who raped a woman outside and was caught. And girls who knew him posted, attached as a photo I took in high school. He's always been that huge loving smile on his face. The caption is awe because he's always the sweetest to everyone. So their argument is that because he didn't rape them, because that was not their experience, then he probably didn't rape her. This happened to me in real life. So when I was in college, I had a boyfriend who actually tried to murder me. I don't know if I mentioned that on the first day. So he was very abusive. And when I tried to leave the abusive relationship, as happens when you try to leave abuse, the violence escalated and he tried to kill me. Years later, we got out of prison for trying to kill another person. All of my old friends invited me to a Motley Crue concert with them. And I was like, when they said, you know, all of them and Richard, I was like, well, I'm not gonna fucking go to a concert with Richard. He tried to kill me, you know? And they're like, well, he never tried to kill me. It's like, okay. And they're like, you know, he's always been nice to me. So, and he said he's cool if you're there. So basically you're the only one with a problem. I'm like, no, I'm not the only one with a problem. He tried to kill me. So I didn't go to Motley Crue. But you hear this a lot. Like, I was also the only one my uncle molested, and he didn't molest my sister. And so the argument is, well, he didn't molest me. It doesn't mean he didn't molest me. It has nothing to do with whether he molested me or not, right? So just because you haven't had that experience doesn't mean that experience isn't happening to someone else. And the idea here is that humility is not thinking less of yourself. You're not thinking like, oh, I'm a piece of shit, but it's about thinking about yourself less. It's about thinking of the time when you were misunderstood and wondering, maybe, just maybe, you might not know. Like something that strikes you as awful and horrific that you want to reject. What if it's true though? You might just not know it, and be open to learning. The third strategy is splaining, condescension, right? So splaining, it started as mansplaining. And it started with this, splaining is an explanation which was put forward in the most patronizing way possible. So mansplaining came about when men presume they know more about a subject than women do, and then they start to explain in very simple terms, right? So they assume that they're more of an expert, whether or not they're actually an expert, right? So somebody posted, this reminds me of a time a male colleague tried to mansplain the gender gap in education to me. I actually co-chair the National Working Group on Gender Gaps and am frequently consulted on the issue. So it's a presumption that women don't know what they're talking about, and men of any competency do. But it's expanded out to look at other things. So white splaining is another thing. So the splainer feels passionately that their opinion and beliefs outweigh actual lived experience or expertise of the other party. So white people love to explain to people of color what is and is not racism, right? And that's an experience that needs to be corrected. So I put the definition of splaining there. To explain or comment on something in a condescending, overconfident, often inaccurate, oversimplified manner from the perspective of the group one identifies in, right? So here's an example. I had a lot of roommates in my life, Charlie. He was actually a former student of mine, as he said, a long time ago. And I was renting out rooms in my house, and I was working on a paper, actually on white incompetence. And I have been studying whiteness and feminism and race. Let's see, I have all of college. I have a 2-year master's and 6 years of a PhD program, followed by 8 more years of being in the field researching. I've been invited to, I was a keynote speaker in a German conference in Trier on white privilege. I've been published. I won a book award, or I was nominated for a book award in women's studies, all on whiteness and gender. Okay, so I have the credentials. And he comes home and he's with his friend. He's like, hey, what are you doing? I said, I'm writing an article. And he's like, what's it about? So I told him my article was about. He goes, yeah, I don't know though. Like, don't you just think you're probably just like reading into it or whatever it was. And he started explaining to me why I probably was wrong about my research. He'd spent all of 5 fucking minutes thinking about this topic. And I've spent 20 years researching this topic, 20 years experience. So I told him, no, I don't think that, and here's why. And then I then said, hey, I also happen to study this kind of rhetoric, so I can predict the next 5 things you're gonna say, which I listed to him. And then he got really mad and he said, well, I'm gonna move out, blah, blah. I was like, why are you moving out? And he's like, because you were so full of rage. You were so terrifying. And I was like, I wasn't terrified. I was standing up for myself, explaining why I knew what I was doing. And then he started crying. He's like, if you would just explained it to me nicely, then none of this would have happened. Anyways. And then I explained it to him and he like hugged and cried. With the idea that I, as a female expert, had to constantly defend my beliefs to somebody, or my knowledge to someone who's thought about the topic for 5 minutes and then teach him about it. That's splaining. So here's a video. Let's see which one I pick. I think it's Australian because they're pretty funny and direct.
So men don't get to decide what's misogynistic, right?
I will not be lectured about sexism and misogyny by this man. I will not.
And straight people don't get to decide what's homophobic.
The whole world's gone gay!
So why is it that some white people reckon it's okay to decide on coloured people's behalf what's racist and what's not?
So it's not because it's Aboriginal or anything like that that is being booed.
White-splaining is when a white guy, me, thinks that they're better able to explain racial discrimination than the very people who experience the brunt of it. Brown people, just like you. Get it, sweetie?
Yeah, I totally get it. White privilege.
Oh, good job.
What are you having for lunch? Pork, bread.
Oh, stinks.
Nazim Hussain is an actor and comedian, best known as one half of comedy duo Fear of a Brown Planet.
White-splaining is a problem in much the same way that men speaking on or behalf of women about sexism is a problem. You would never hear a bunch of men talking about motherhood in the same way.
White-splaining is really just a new zeitgeisty way to cover up racism, but it's become a thing now thanks to the very public f**k-ups of big names like this guy and this guy. When a black female filmmaker talked on Damon's HBO show Project Greenlight recently about how more diverse people making movies is needed in Hollywood, he decided to interrupt her to white-splain why she was wrong.
When we're talking about diversity, you do it in the casting of the film, not in the casting of the show.
Whew.
Wow, okay.
Mr. Bourne Identity has since apologised for his faux pas, but meanwhile, closer to home, king douchebag of the radio, Kyle Sandilands, has been white-splaining why The Bachelorette has a lack of diversity in contestants, saying race is irrelevant.
I think a lot of young people, they don't think like that. They don't think, oh, we better have a black, we better have a brown. We just think people are people.
I chose to write about the subject because it's not okay that white people in positions of authority, it's not okay that they get to say race today is not a problem. When it is a problem, it just doesn't affect them.
I'm Andrew Bolt and this is the Bolt Report.
Columnist and Channel 10 commentator Andrew Bolt is a serial offender.
And that's the Australia I know. It is not fundamentally racist. This really is about Adam Goodes' actions and the attempt to create racial divisions where none really exist.
When a white person explains to a person of colour what the problem with racism is, it is an enactment of racism.
It's a knee-jerk reaction almost. They go to the extreme opposite and say, well, we don't see race, we don't see colour. and it's absolutely nonsense.
Calling out white-splaining isn't about saying white people can't talk about race or racism. It's just that people from different cultural backgrounds are more often than not going to be the best placed to speak about their own experience.
I think people of colour are saying, hey, that's enough. Let us speak about our own experiences. Give us the space. You've got that platform. Why don't you share that platform with people who really need to be able to express their experiences of racism, of bigotry, of prejudice in their own lives, in their own words.
So white-splaining just happened on Facebook right before I did this lecture, and I was like, oh my god, this is perfect for the lecture. Not that, sorry, trigger warning, this is gross. So here is a teacher that I think was one of Trump's top 100 teachers of the year or something like that, and she posted, if we want to make America great again, we have to make evil people fear punishment again. And there's a picture of a noose. My friend posted it as, look at this disgusting racist, we need to do something about it, right? And you see here at the bottom, somebody posted, white and black people both got hanged as a form of punishment decades ago. This isn't even racist. So the person of color posted this. Presumably a white or somebody else said, this isn't even racist. You know, so they're white-splaining, this isn't racist, you don't know what you're talking about. When in fact, the noose was a symbol of the KKK. All you have to do is type in the noose as a hate symbol, and it said that it was one of the most powerful visual symbols directed against African Americans, comparable in the emotions to that of a swastika for Jews. The origins are connected to the history of lynching in America, when the threat of violence replaced slavery as the main form of social control. The noose is associated with the KKK. In the early 20th century, when the rise of the second Ku Klux Klan coincided with the height of lynching, most of the victims were African American, the noose became cemented as the hate symbol targeting African Americans. The noose may appear as a drawing or rendering, but is often quite common the use of actual nooses to intimidate or harass African Americans or sometimes other minorities, for example, by leaving one at someone's home or their workplace. So the problem isn't that this girl didn't know that this was racist, right? Because maybe you didn't know that. Maybe you didn't know that that was a symbol. But it comes from, splaining is when you become certain that your knowledge and opinion about that is more or greater than a person of color or somebody else's opinion about that. She has no concern whatsoever that maybe she doesn't know that that's a symbol. She's positive she knows what the symbol means. And so that's splaining. It's not knowing. It's about refusing to know and being confident in your lack of knowledge, basically. Being confident that your lack of knowledge is still greater than anybody else's, regardless of evidence to the contrary. Okay, that's those two.